Hi, my name's Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. In today's video, I want to talk about what's involved in being a police officer. Although I do love my job and probably sometimes fancy myself as a bit of a detective, I'm not. There is absolutely no way, and I know there isn't, that I could be a police officer in today's communities. I'm just going to begin by going off topic a little bit, so stay with me on this. It is logical. Meet Tim. Tim is 40 years old. He's married to his childhood sweetheart of 15 years. They had their third baby on their way. Tim goes to visit his parents for Sunday dinner every week. He takes his wife and his children with him. He's a loving family man, devoted to his family. Tim also enjoys amateur dramatics and regularly performs in shows. Tim is a dog lover and he's helped to rehome many dogs in his life. He's kind, he's caring, he'd do absolutely anything for anyone. He works really hard for a living. He works shifts and he works long hours. He gets up like everybody else, gets washed, gets dressed, drives to work, does a shift. While he was in work just yesterday, he was spat at and called a lot of derogatory names. He had to fight another man in self-defence and wrestle him to the ground. That caused him to have a few bruises and a few scrapes. He barely had time to write down all the details and get him into a van before he was called out again. Later that day, he had to go to a house where an old lady had lived on her own. She was shaken and upset because somebody had taken her purse while she was out. Tim had to reassure her that he'd do everything that he possibly could to get it back for her. Later, he went to a house where neighbours say that they thought a child was at risk. He had to force his way into the house and find a little girl locked in the bedroom. She was 5 years old. Tim had taken some friends with him to help. Tim then sat in the bedroom with the little girl while he could hear shouting and fighting outside the door. The little girl was covered in bruises and was bleeding because she'd been raped. Tim made sure that the little girl was placed safely in the arms of a social worker before going to interview the male suspect in the house. Tim had to show that man respect, and he had to talk to him as normally as possible and be completely objective. He couldn't show his anger and disgust towards this man. He knew it wasn't his place to decide if he was innocent or guilty, but only he had to gather as much information as possible. Tim is now 4 hours into his shift as a police officer. He was called to a fight at a bar. When he and his colleagues entered the bar, they were attacked. They were hit with chairs and they were called names. The rest of the day was spent filling in paperwork. He earns £24,000 a year. Then we have Steve. Steve is a 30-year-old man who lives on his own in the city. He's also a very kind and caring person. He enjoys going out with his friends and playing golf. He enjoys going to concerts and festivals to watch bands. Steve works a 9-to-5 job as an office worker. He gets up each morning, gets showered, goes to work. He grabs a coffee on the way because he has a meeting as soon as he gets in. He goes to his meeting with 10 other people. He gives a presentation which he feels goes quite well. When he took questions at the end, one person asked him if his insight into the business etiquette of Israeli people comes from the fact that he's Jewish. At the end of that meeting, Steve went to his manager and filed a complaint. The person who asked the question was given a written warning and was made to attend a course on racial awareness. Steve earns £24,000 a year. So both men earn the same amount of money. However, one is very well protected within the workplace and is very unlikely to ever be hit, slapped, called names and so on. The police do an extraordinary, versatile job. They are the protectors, they're the reasoners, they're the objective one, the one to calm things down during a heated exchange, the subject of a lot of rage and aggression from people. If we just look back over the past couple of weeks, we've seen protests about the police simply doing their job. The media does have a lot to blame for this though. If we look back at Sarah Everard, who was kidnapped and murdered last week when she was walking home, that crime was carried out by a serving officer in the Metropolitan Police. This led to people wanting to hold a vigil for her. But the group that organised that changed their mind about holding the vigil last minute because they didn't want people breaking the stay-at-home rules which were in place because of COVID-19. However, another group tweeted to say that they were still planning on attending the vigil. Initially, officers were calm and chatted to those who were attending. The majority of officers who were deployed to that were female officers. However, as the numbers grew and more people came to that vigil, more officers came out, and then they began to have to enforce the COVID rules banning public gatherings and attempted to encourage the protesters on the bandstand to leave. This decision was taken to protect people against the virus. It wasn't to take away their rights. It wasn't to disempower anybody or to not allow them to speak out against anything. One angry female protester screamed out, "How dare you? How dare you?" And she was filmed jabbing her finger at a police officer who replied, "I'm as ashamed as anybody that a police officer has done this. However, this is no longer a vigil. It's an unlawful gathering in the middle of a pandemic." I understand and appreciate that that vigil was, in part, a protest against violence on women. Ironically, it turned violent as emotions and frustrations grew. All over the media then, we see the horrific and the violent scenes that took place. Women were protesting about violence against them, with scenes of women being forced to the floor and arrested, but that was because they refused to leave. What were the police to do? They were doing a job to protect people. They were doing a job, and that they were told then that the numbers had grown so much that the crowds had to be dispersed. When they tried to do this, however, they became the focus of the frustration and the emotion of those people in attendance at that vigil. Each police officer is a person. They're someone's son, daughter, wife, husband, brother, sister. However, because of the job that they decided to do, the protesters expected them to sit back and allow people to poke at them, to make abusing statements, to throw things at them, to push them back. On the day that I wrote notes for this video, there were in the media reports of violent protest in Bristol, and these were against a bill that was put through allowing the police officers to use greater powers to restrict protests. Avon and Somerset Police said that glass bottles, bricks and eggs were thrown at their officers. Fireworks were also launched at its mounted division, the force claimed, and they said that one horse had been covered with paint. Those officers were doing the job that they get paid for. They don't get any extra if they get punched in the face. They don't get paid more if they have to arrest those causing disorder. It's their job. They go home at the end of the day to their family, to their friends, their partners, and they treat their wounds and their bruises. We, as in the general public, seem to think that it's okay to blame the police as a whole at times. There does seem to be, increasingly so, a lack of separation between the police as an organisation and the police officer as a person doing a job. Being a police officer is a very challenging job, which can be emotionally draining at times. These people put their lives at risk to protect us every single day. They receive a great deal of criticism that workers in other jobs would never be subjected to. The next time you see a police officer, give them a smile, a hello, or maybe even a thank you. They're there to protect you, not to make your life more difficult. Before you jump onto the comments and you start typing things about what happened in the vigil for Sarah Everard or what happened in Bristol and the police's reaction, the actual details of that aren't really the focus of this video. What I really wanted to focus on is that police officers are people doing a job. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do hope you've enjoyed it and you've learned something new. Thanks for watching then. Bye for now.